I've explored a lot of abandoned places in my life. Hospitals, factories, even an old asylum, but that mine in northern Nevada, it was different. It felt like something down there was waiting for me, and it didn't want me to leave. Before I start, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and leave a like if you enjoy true horror stories like this one. And whatever you do, watch until the end. The ending of this story will shock you in ways you won't expect. It all started as a weekend trip with my friend Jared. He was a hobby urban explorer who ran a small YouTube channel dedicated to documenting abandoned places across the American Southwest. I usually tagged along to hold the camera or take photos, but I'd never actually gone into a mine before. When he told me about an old silver mine near Tanapa that supposedly hadn't been touched since the 1940s. Primera visita, dead. Mines were different from empty buildings. They were unpredictable, dangerous, alive in their own way. But Jared was persuasive. He showed me some blurry photos from a hiker who had stumbled across the site the year before. Massive tunnels carved into the rock, rusted mine carts, half-buried helmets. He said it looked cinematic, perfect for his next video. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We drove out early one Saturday morning, leaving behind the stretch of empty desert highway and taking a dirt road that wound up into the mountains. The air was still and dry. By the time we reached the site, the sun was already beginning to dip behind the peaks, turning everything gold. The entrance was half collapsed, a wide, gaping mouth of rock, framed by old wooden beams blackened with age. There was a strange smell drifting out of it, something metallic and stale, like rust mixed with damp air that hadn't moved in decades. Jared was thrilled. Perfect, he said, setting up his tripod. We'll get some B-roll outside, then head in before dark. Before dark, I asked, "Is you sure about that?" He just grinned. What's the fun without a little danger? We strapped on our helmets with small LED lights and stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. The desert heat vanished, replaced by a deep, clammy chill that clung to my skin. Every sound seemed to echo a drip of water, the crunch of gravel under our boots, the hum of the camera. The deeper we went, the more the light from the entrance faded until it was just a faint orange glow behind us. The walls were jagged and uneven, carved with pick marks from another century. Old wooden supports creaked above us. Rusted rails ran along the floor, leading deeper into the dark. Jared kept narrating for the camera, his voice bouncing strangely around the tunnel. I tried to stay focused, but something about the silence between our words felt off. There was a low hum I couldn't quite place, like the faint vibration of machinery far away, but that didn't make sense. The mine had been abandoned for decades. We reached a fork about 30 minutes in. One tunnel sloped downward into blackness. The other curved sharply to the right. Jared pointed at the downward tunnel. That's where the main shaft should be. Let's check it out. I hesitated. We should probably mark our path. These tunnels can branch off in weird ways. Relax, he said. I've got a GPS tracker running. So we kept going. The air grew heavier the deeper we descended. The walls seemed to close in, and every breath felt damp and cold. Then that humming sound returned louder this time. It didn't sound mechanical anymore. It was tonal, almost like a voice. A deep, drawn-out note that vibrated in my chest. Do you hear that? I whispered. Jared paused. Hear what? That sound. Like a low. Before I could finish, my headlamp flickered. The beam sputtered, went out for half a second, then came back on. Jared's camera light did the same. He laughed nervously. Probably interference. Happens underground sometimes, but I wasn't so sure. There was no signal this deep underground. We came to a large open chamber after another 10 minutes. The ceiling disappeared into blackness. An old rusted machinery sat half-buried in dust, massive drills, broken rail carts, piles of rotten timber. I noticed something on the floor near one of the supports. A boot. It looked ancient, covered in dust, but still intact. Hey, check this out, I said, pointing. Jared zoomed in with the camera. That's awesome. Probably a miner's boot. Let's grab a close-up. He crouched beside it, brushing away the dirt. But as I did, I noticed something beside the boot, a faint handprint on the rock wall. It wasn't fresh, but it wasn't completely faded either. And it was smaller than I expected. Too small for a miner. I felt that same humming again, deeper now, like it was coming from below the floor. "Jared," I said quietly, "we should go." He waved me off. "Just a few more shots." I turned to scan the chamber with my flashlight, and that's when I saw it. On the far side of the room, maybe 30 feet away, the light caught a shape, something pale against the darkness. It looked like a person, crouched behind a piece of machinery. I froze. "Jared," I whispered, "there's someone here." He looked up. "What?" I pointed. "Over there." But when I turned back, the shape was gone. I felt my stomach twist. "I swear, I saw something." "Probably a trick of the light," he said, though his voice wasn't confident anymore. We stood there in silence for a moment. The only sound was that low hum, almost like a distant breath, echoing through the tunnels. Then something fell, a rock, from the ceiling or maybe a shelf above. It clattered across the floor. We both flinched. "That's it," I said, backing toward the tunnel. "We're leaving." But Jared didn't move. His camera was still aimed at the dark corner where I'd seen the figure. And then, from that same direction, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, scraping across the gravel. Jared turned his light toward it, and the beam went out. The darkness swallowed us completely. For a few seconds, there was nothing, no light, no sound except the frantic pounding of my heart. Then Jared cursed under his breath, fumbling with his flashlight. The beam sputtered weakly, finally illuminating his face pale, wide-eyed and tense. "Okay," he muttered. "Okay. Maybe the batteries are dying." But I wasn't listening. My ears were straining for any hint of that sound again. The footsteps had stopped, replaced by an awful silence that felt thick, as if the air itself was holding its breath. "Let's go," I said quietly. "We've got enough footage." He didn't argue this time. We turned back toward the tunnel we came from, but the second I looked at it, my stomach dropped. The tunnel seemed different. The walls were tighter, darker. The slope was wrong. I could have sworn we came in from a gentler incline, but this one descended sharply, and I didn't recognize the pattern of supports along the ceiling. "Wait," I said, stopping. "This isn't the way we came." Jared turned, swinging the camera light around. "No, it has to be. The GPS says." He froze mid-sentence, staring at his screen. "It's gone. The signal's gone." That was impossible. Even offline, it should have been tracking our path. But all it showed was a single tower position in. Nothing else. Something about the mine didn't make sense anymore. The tunnels weren't matching up in my head. I could feel that we'd been turned around somehow, but I didn't remember changing direction. I forced myself to breathe slowly. "Okay, we'll just retrace step by step. Look for the markers. We passed the boot, the machinery. But as we walked, those things never appeared again. Every chamber looked different, every turn unfamiliar. The air was heavier too, like we were walking deeper underground instead of back toward the surface. Then the sound returned. At first, I thought it was the humming again, but no, this was closer. Softer, like whispering. He spun around my flashlight beam, cutting through the dust. Nothing. Just rock and shadow. But the whispering didn't stop. It seemed to come from behind the walls themselves. A faint, breathy murmur in a language I couldn't recognize. "Do you hear that?" I asked. Jared nodded slowly. "Yeah. Maybe it's air moving through cracks. Since when does air whisper names?" I said before I realized what I'd heard, because I was sure, absolutely sure, that I'd heard my name in that noise. A long, drawn-out version of it, distorted, like it came from underwater. "Tom." I felt the blood drain from my face. Jared aimed his light into the darkness ahead. "Who's there?" The whispering stopped. Then just ahead something moved. A flicker of pale motion. Like a shoulder or arm vanishing behind the rock. "Wait," Jared shouted, running forward before I could stop him. His voice echoed unnaturally, repeating itself like there were 10 versions of him shouting in different directions. I hesitated, but then followed. The tunnel opened into another large cavern, this one lower, tighter, with beams that looked ready to collapse. Jared was standing in the middle, sweeping his camera back and forth. "Someone's down here," he said. "Has to be. Maybe squatters or another explorer." But the air was wrong. The smell of rust was sharper now, mixed with something else, something sweet and rotten. I shone my light around the walls and saw strange markings carved into the rock. Circles, lines, symbols I didn't recognize. Some filled in with what looked like soot or ash. "Jared, what the hell is this?" He turned, confused. "Maybe old miner signs? Miners didn't draw this," I whispered. There were handprints, 2 small ones, just like the one near the boot, but dozens of them. Some overlapping, some streaked downward as if the hands had been dragged. The whispering began again, louder this time, circling us. I felt something brush past my ear, a soft gust of air, but cold, like a breath from someone standing inches behind me. I spun around, heart racing. Nothing. "Let's go," I said again, almost shouting. "Now!" Jared didn't argue this time. He shoved the camera into his bag, grabbed his flashlight, and we ran. The tunnels blurred together as we sprinted through them. I don't know how long we ran it. Felt endless. The whispers followed us, overlapping now, like dozens of voices murmuring at once. Sometimes I thought I heard laughter. Sometimes my name again, dragged out and distorted. At one point, the ground beneath us shifted. My foot hit something soft, and I stumbled forward. I turned the flashlight down and froze. It wasn't a rock I'd tripped on. It was a helmet, and in see that, still faintly visible beneath the layer of dust, was a skull. I couldn't breathe. There were more scattered around the floor, half-buried bones and rusted tools. It wasn't just one miner who died down here. It was dozens. Jared gagged, turning away. Jesus Christ. The whispers had grown almost deafening now. They weren't coming from one direction anymore. They were everywhere. I grabbed Jared's arm. "Run." We took off again, blindly this time. No sense of direction left. I just wanted to be out. At some point, my light flickered again, and for a split second, in that brief flash, I saw something behind us. It looked human, but wrong. Its limbs were too long. Its skin pale and stretched thin over bones. The head was tilted, almost touching its shoulder, and its mouth gawed. Its mouth was wide open, but I didn't hear it scream. I just felt it, like the sound was happening inside my skull instead of in the air. The light went out completely. I don't know how long we kept running after that. Maybe minutes, maybe an hour. The darkness felt endless. Then, suddenly, Jared shouted, "Light! I see light." I looked up and saw it to a faint, flickering glow ahead. We sprinted toward it, lungs burning, until we stumbled into a narrow passage that opened into a smaller chamber. But the light wasn't sunlight. It was a single, old-fashioned lantern, sitting on the ground, burning faintly, and beside it was another camera. It looked just like Jared's same model, same strap, but it was covered in dust. He reached down and picked it up. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Mine's right here." He held up his bag, unzipped his hand, froze. The camera wasn't inside anymore. Jared stared into his open bag, his face twisting in disbelief. "It was just here," he whispered. "I swear it was just here." The old lantern beside us hissed softly, the flame trembling as if disturbed by a draft, but there was no air movement down here. The light made the walls shimmer, revealing more of those handprints smeared into the stone. They covered the tunnel leading out of this chamber, all pointing inward, as if whatever made them had been coming in, not leaving. "We're not alone," I said quietly. Jared swallowed hard, still clutching the dusty camera he'd found. "What do you mean?" "Look at the walls," I said, backing toward the tunnel. "They're pointing here." He turned slowly, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The beam flicked across the walls, illuminating dozens, no, hundreds of small, dark shapes pressed into the stone. The longer I stared, the more I realized some of them weren't old. They were wet, fresh. Jared's breathing turned shallow. "We need to get out of here." He picked up the lantern, its glass rattling faintly, and turned toward the narrow passage opposite the one we came from. I followed, my body numb with fear. The tunnel beyond the chamber twisted sharply, sloping upward. For the first time in hours, I felt a flicker of hope. But the deeper we went, the louder something else became. It wasn't the whispers anymore. It was tapping, slow, rhythmic, metallic, like a pickaxe striking stone. Clang. Pause. Clang. Pause. Jared stopped dead. "Tell me that's not real." I didn't answer. The sound was getting closer. He swung the flashlight toward the source, but the beam caught only jagged rock. The tapping continued, echoing from every direction at once, until I couldn't tell whether it was ahead of us or behind. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence pressed down again, heavier than before. My pulse roared in my ears. "Keep moving," I whispered. We climbed faster now, the walls narrowing until we had to crouch. The lantern flame flickered wildly, throwing long shadows that twisted and bent in ways that didn't match our movements. Then Jared froze again.
"Tom."
"Look." I turned my head and saw a set of eyes staring back at us from the darkness ahead. They were low to the ground, small and gleaming white in the lantern light. For a moment I thought it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a coyote that had wandered in, but then the eyes rose, slowly, higher. Until they were level with mine. Jared stumbled back, tripping over a loose rock. The light from the lantern wavered, and in that unsteady glow, I saw the thing fully for the first time. It was humanoid, but its proportions were wrong, its arms too long, its skin gray and stretched taut, its face completely smooth except for those hollow, shining eyes. No mouth, no nose, just that pale, skin-covered skull. And when it moved, it didn't walk. It folded forward, its limbs bending like joints, weren't a superset. Jared screamed and bolted down another side tunnel I hadn't even seen. I followed instinctively, the lantern nearly slipping from my hand. Behind us, the creature's limbs scraped against the stone with a horrible, dry sound like fingernails on slate. We ran until my lungs felt like they were on fire. I didn't even know if we were going deeper or up anymore. All I knew was that it was following us. The tapping sound had turned into something faster, on a rhythmic clatter, echoing off every wall. At one point, Jared stumbled again and dropped the lantern. It shattered on the rocks, the flames sputtering out. The darkness that followed was complete. "Jared," I shouted, my voice cracking. No answer. Just the faint sound of movement in the dark, too quiet to tell if it was him or something else. I swung my flashlight around, my hand shaking. The beam caught the tunnel wall, the floor, and then juiced for a split second a shadow darting across the ceiling above me. It was fast. Too fast. Something landed behind me with a heavy thud, a spoon around heart hammering, and saw it again closer. This time, the thing was crouched, its featureless face inches from the light. The skin seemed to pulse faintly, as if something beneath it was moving. I didn't think, I just ran. The tunnel split again, and I turned left at random, calling Jared's name. My voice echoed back at me once, twice, then again from somewhere ahead. "Tom." It wasn't my voice. I froze. "Tom." It came again, softer this time, from the darkness in front of me. Then a figure stepped into view, lit faintly by the glow of my flashlight. It was Jared Dorr, it looked like him, but something was wrong. His face was pale, his eyes glassy, his mouth half open like a puppet waiting for someone to move its strings. "Tom," it said again, but the voice didn't match the lips. It sounded distant, like an echo coming from somewhere deep inside the mine. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. "You're not." Before I could finish, the thing tilted its head, unnaturally far, the bones in its neck crackling like dry wood, and then it smiled. That was when I ran. I didn't look back. I just ran until my flashlight started to dim and my legs gave out beneath me. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. For a long time, there was only silence. Then faintly I saw light again. This time, it wasn't a lantern. It was sunlight. Real sunlight. I crawled toward it, dragging myself up the final stretch until I spilled out of the tunnel and into the open desert. The sky was pale pink, dawn breaking over the mountains. I must have been down there all night. I didn't stop running until I reached the truck. Jared wasn't there. His gear, his bag, everything gone. I called the sheriff's department later that morning. They sent a search team, but when they returned 2 days later, they told me they couldn't find the mine, not even the entrance. I know what I saw. I know where I was. But when I went back a week later with a local guide, all we found were flat rocks and desert scrub. No opening. No sign of digging. The strangest part. A month later, a package showed up at my door. No return address. Inside was a single camera, dusty, cracked. Jared's. When I turned it on, there was only one file. A video, less than 10 seconds long. It showed the inside of the mine, the same chamber with the handprints. But this time Jared was behind the camera, panting, shaking. He turned the lens toward himself, his face ghost white. Then the camera turned toward the darkness behind him, and something moved. The screen went black, but the last sound on the recording was clear as day. A metallic clang. Pause. Clang. Like someone deep underground was still digging. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment about what you think Jared saw down there, and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. Because some places, like that mine, should never be explored.